Hi Neil, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. We have questions about extraction, quality, differentials, sustainability, and the benefits of taking the supplement and more. But first, could you tell us a little bit about krill oil and its habitat?
Well, krill is an interesting creature. It is at the very bottom of the food chain, and the particular krill that we are fishing is called Antarctic krill because that's where it lives. So it lives in Antarctica, it's just south of the polar currents, and it is really the key species in the ecosystem in that region of the world. So we are fishing exactly where South America kisses Antarctica, okay. the western peninsula.
Okay. What makes krill oil a clean source for its natural occurring nutrients?
Well, then let's go back to Antarctica, because still the Antarctic waters are probably the cleanest water on the planet. So that in itself makes anything that is harvested in that area clean. The other thing is, of course, that it is very far down in the food chain, which means that it doesn't accumulate whatever might find its way down to Antarctica. And then, of course, it is immediately processed on board the boat. So that also keeps it preserved and fresh when it enters our production.
We know that Aker Biomarine takes sustainability very seriously. Could you talk about it? How sustainability is applied in the day-to-day business and observe results?
Well, sustainability in that particular region is not really a question about being nice or kind. To set up our operations in such a way that we do not harm the ecosystem in Antarctica is paramount. It is absolutely necessary. So when Aker started its operations way back in 2005, our owner said that either we will do this sustainably or we can't do it at all. It's also a question about our investment, because if we harm the population of krill, then our investment will be wasted. Now, so it is really, we used to say that it is in our DNA. And we've done quite a lot of consulting with NGOs like the World Wildlife Fund and similar to ask about their opinion about how to do this. And then let's not forget that the fisheries in the region is under an international treaty called CAMELAR. That has been a tremendous success, really, in regulating the fisheries in Antarctica, and krill is actually a major part of that regulation in itself.
How is eco-harvesting technology perceived in the quality of krill oil?
Well, let me first say a little bit about what eco-harvesting is. It's a trade name, or our technology. Now, usually when you trawl, then you drag a huge net through the water, and then you catch whatever you want to catch, like fish or krill. Then you hive the trawl, take it on board the boat, and then you what we call shoot the trawl again and do it again. Now, in eco-harvesting, that doesn't happen. So we shoot the trawl, and it is kept out in the water for weeks at a time, 2 to 3 weeks. Now, how do we do that? There is a huge hose, so rubber hose, that actually sucks the krill that comes into the trawl directly into the boat in a flowing stream, year around, or day around, week around. So the krill gets on board the boat live. And then there is a number of provisions in front of the trawl and in the way we operate the trawl to keep any bycatch. So no seals, no penguins, no fish, really. All the fish we have for the fishermen actually have to be transported out as frozen fish from Montevideo. So, and altogether this becomes then what we call eco-harvesting. So it provides fresh krill on board, it provides a continuous operation, and it prevents bycatch.
And how does this translate to the natural occurring nutrients in the krill oil?
Well, again, since this is a stream of live krill coming on board, if in a conventional trawl, everything that is catched is squeezed towards the net. And when you hive this on board the boat, everything is really squeezed together. Now, with krill, that's a really bad idea, because krill has digestive enzymes,
Okay.
and they will be immediately activated when krill dies. And in effect, you will easily have a bucket of slime on board rather than krill.
Okay.
So this also preserves the krill, preserves the product, because it is immediately taken from being live into being processed. So there is no such degradation taking place.
Why is product traceability important?
Oh, there are many reasons for that. First of all, when you buy our product, you should know where it came from, and that's a commitment towards our customers. And we've set. It's also a question about being transparent. We have on board our boats, we have independent observers, not paid by us. They are hired through a third party, and they check everything we do. Okay. And so that's also part of the traceability question. And we've taken this to a level where you could actually, on every package sold, there is a little, you can put in a little position information, and you could go on the internet and you could actually type in the position and you could see exactly where the krill was caught. That is in your krill oil box.
Okay. You are touching something very important, Neil. Let's make sure everybody understands the differential of traceability, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Aker Biomarine has full control of the entire process. From harvest to table, or even more appropriate here, from catch to capsule.
Yep, that is correct. And I even haven't much more to add there. Again, this is our business model. So we are totally vertically integrated. And we do not leave out any step to a third party.
What precautions are taken to preserve krill biomass in nature?
Well, I mentioned Kamalar. I also want to mention that last year we and other parties in what is called ARK, the Organization of Responsible Krill Fisheries, accepted voluntarily an agreement with Greenpeace and with other NGOs to keep out of certain geographical zones in the area during the season when, for example, penguins have their chicks. So, but the whole fishery is very regulated. It is certified as the most sustainable fishery on the planet as per today, and that has been the case for the last 4 years.
What are the differences between this extraction method to other different?
Well, in our technology, we only use water and ethanol, so that's important. So there are no other solvents, organic solvents involved, which in itself is a good thing. Then another difference is that it is at relatively low temperatures. That we probably are never above 40 degrees Celsius at any step in our processing, which is very different from, for example, fish oils that go through distillation with very high temperatures. And then it is pretty much a raw extract. It's almost like extra virgin oil.
Yes.
And so it's minimally processed. The one processing we do is to take out salts, and that is done by large-scale chromatography. And those salts are sodium chloride, but also a number of inorganic salts, and then most importantly, the substance that makes krill oil smell, called trimethylamine oxide. And all of this is then removed by chromatography.
Can you tell us about healthy promoting compounds that krill has naturally? Choline, phospholipids, astaxantin, DHA, and EPA?
Well, then I want to go back to fish. It's been known for a long, long time that fish is healthy, and especially fatty fish from cold waters. Here in Brazil, it would typically be sardines, to a certain extent salmon, or other types of fatty fish. Now, what do they provide? They provide certain types of fats that is not really food, but that makes it into becoming parts of your body. So they are incorporated in your cells, in your cell membranes, and these are, and then I'm talking about EPA and DHA. Now, EPA and DHA comes in different forms, and in fish you will find it typically as a phospholipid, which is the structural fat. And then you find it as triglycerides, which actually is the typical energy storage fat. And krill oil provides these essential fatty acids as both phospholipid and triglycerides. And that is really differentiating it from, for example, fish oil or ethyl esters that only serve it either as ethyl esters or as triglycerides. And in this respect, krill oil is, and this is strange, but krill oil is more similar to fish than fish oil.
Often we hear how important it is to a nutrient to be natural. Could you explain to us, please, how natural differs from synthetic astaxanthin and its functionality?
Well, first of all, synthetic astaxanthin is used mainly as a colorant in the aquaculture industry. There are also aquaculture that do not use synthetic astaxanthin. The synthesis in itself, synthesis is always a difficult game. So as long as the synthesis only provides astaxanthin in its natural form, I have nothing against it. But synthesis may leave other substances. That there is no such thing as a perfect synthesis. So then you have to clean it up, and you have to clean it up onto a certain level. So there will always be a question about if your product is clean enough. Okay. Now, with natural astaxanthin, that's not the case. And then there is another big difference, and that is astaxanthin is a molecule that has two diol groups, that is, two alcoholic groups. And on each of these two groups, there sits a fatty acid, and it's called esterified astaxanthin. That is what nature provides. So in algae, and in the algae that krill eats, or in krill, you will always find astaxanthin as esterified astaxanthin. And that's a major difference because it keeps it preserves the astaxanthin, and also when it functions as an antioxidant, it liberates free astaxanthin in the amount necessary to function as an antioxidant. So there are clear differences between the synthetic. Also, the specific form that comes from the natural is defined by nature as dominated by one specific form, while when you synthesize, you get what we call a racemic mixture, simply a statistical mixture of different varieties of the same molecule.
Okay, it's more bioavailable.
I would be careful about it because the word bioavailability here is a little different. So I wouldn't stress that too much. I would rather stress the fact that they are really different. Okay. And especially the effects in the oil, because you should not forget that astaxanthin is a very important preservative for the oil.
Yes.
And nature makes this preservative to take care of it in krill oil, and also in ourselves.
Is krill omega-3 better observed than fish omega-3?
Well, it depends on how you say the word better. Okay. Because it is different. And as I said, nature seems to prefer getting its omegas as phospholipids and as triglycerides, okay. Exactly the way fish would do it, and the way fish oil or krill oil would do
okay.
it. So what we do know, and this has been a long journey of research, what we do know is that the phospholipid-bound omega-3s are taken up as is, and while regular fats are taken up in lymph and then are sent into your body circulation from lymph, and then in the end hits the liver. Krill oil phospholipids are delivered directly to the liver. And this actually makes two different uptake mechanisms. And what we see is that krill oil, give or take, is about 50% or twice as efficiently incorporated into cells than if you give it as triglycerides or free fatty acids. And that's a major difference. And it shows that there are different pathways, so to say. So if that is better, that depends on the eyes who look at it, and it also depends on what exactly you're looking for. What we do know is that the presentation of the fatty acids, for example DHA, to the brain is by phospholipids. Okay. We also know that the same is crossing the placenta. We also now know that there is actually a specific uptake mechanism for the phospholipids in the gut and in the liver. So clearly, nature wants, as if it's possible, to have its omega-3s as a phospholipid.
Okay. Does our body produce EPA and DHA?
No. Your body can, to a very small extent, do that. There are genetic differences, and I know, for example, that people in Inner Mongolia that hardly eat any seafood at all actually do have okay levels. But in most populations, and because of our high intake of omega-6 fatty acids, there are a very specific step called delta-6 desaturase. And that is the limiting step. And there is a competition between omega-3s and omega-6s for the desaturase. And so our conversion rate from alpha-linolenic acid, which is the shorter chain, to EPA is clearly less than a few percent. And the conversion rate from EPA to DHA, which would be the next step, is way less than 1%. Okay. So you need to eat it.
Okay. What about choline?
Choline is also an interesting issue. There are two large investigations into the population's general intake of choline. It is both the FDA in the USA and EFSA in Europe published a couple of years ago surveys where they concluded that on average the population only get about 80% of the amount of choline we need. That is pretty critical because choline is one of those molecules that has functions pretty much in a large section of your body's biochemistry and metabolism. It's not really an okay thing to know that on average the population do not get enough. Now, and people take choline salts, like the bitartrate or even the chloride. Now, these salts are good food for bacteria in your gut. And to a large extent, they will be digested by bacteria. And the bacteria will actually make trimethylamine, the smelly substance that then enters your body and is then being excreted as trimethylamine oxide in your liver and in your kidneys. When you take it as phosphatidylcholine, which is just not the choline but the whole fatty substance, even together with bound together with DHA or EPA, it is taken up as is. And we just did some interesting experiments where we showed that, and there is a publication coming, where we show that no quantifiable amount of TMAO is being made from phosphatidylcholine.
Are there any new scientific studies about krill oil recently released?
Well, first of all, we have several studies going on. And they're not really finished. We have had one large study together with the American military for the so-called Ranger study, where we look at the performance of those elite soldiers in specific areas, for example, cognitive performance, after they've been supplemented with krill oil for a long time, as compared with placebo. We also have two studies going on in Australia on osteoarthritis and what I would call joint discomfort, so slight pain in the joints or stiffness. But there are others have published quite a number of studies, both in animals and in humans. There has been studies recently connecting or correlating krill oil with cognitive performance. There has been studies where we've looked at skin and how the intake of krill oil may hydrate your skin and improve its elasticity. And there are a number of other more fundamental studies going on. And then, of course, there are quite a number of studies, I guess more than 20 now, clinical studies from now and way back. And we are increasing our research capacities. There are also more fundamental studies on the phospholipids and the specific transport of phospholipids, as I mentioned, being published by a group especially in Singapore, at the National University of Singapore, that also links directly into krill. And then there are studies on. There was a recent study published on Alzheimer's disease that questioned that a certain subgroup of Alzheimer's disease patients might benefit from the phospholipid form rather than the usual triglyceride form.
Excellent. And if you don't mind me asking, do you take krill oil daily?
Yes, I do.
Yes, okay. Do you use it to help you compensate your diet, to make your diet healthier, or why do you take krill oil?
Well, I should have eaten more fatty fish.
Okay.
So that would, and when I get this question, that's always the preferred way of doing it.
Okay.
But now, especially when I live in New York, I do not have access to the kind of fatty fish really that I need. And so it is convenient, I would say, and it is the safe way to take my supplements every day.
On our website, we received several questions about krill oil, and today we are here with an expert to answer them all. What are the differences between krill oil and fish oil supplement of omega-3?
Well, the difference is in the phospholipids, okay. And the difference is also the content of astaxantin.
Okay.
And of course, if you also look at, because let's face it, when you take an oil, the oil consists of EPA and DHA, that we know is the important active ingredients. But it is really a complex mixture of many different fats.
Okay.
And krill oil is really quite different from fish oil in that respect too. So the fatty acid profile is different. For example, you find very little omega-6 fats in krill oil. And you find more in certain types of fish oil. And then, of course, the processing is different. Fish oil has been refined. You have to do that with fish oils because otherwise they would be way too polluted. And typically, fish oils are made from oil that may have been stored for 2 years or more when they are being refined, okay. While krill oil is always a fresh product.
What are the differences between EPA and DHA?
Well, EPA is a short name for a Greek word, and which actually is eicosapentaenoic acid. Eicosa means 20, penta means 5, and enoic acid is a fatty acid with double bonds. So it is simply the 20 long fatty acid that has 5 double bonds. And then the first double bond is in the omega-3 position. Docosahexaenoic acid, it means 22 long, 6 double bonds, okay. And still the same. So they are 2 molecules that are siblings. Okay. They share structural features. They have quite different functions, though. And they actually look differently. You know, they may chemically look different, similar, but their structure is quite different. The EPA is a circular form, while DHA is a coplanar form. And DHA is really quite specific in the way it's incorporated into brain. It really is 30% of the prefrontal cortex. Okay. Fatty mass is actually DHA, and your brain cannot function without it. Then DHA also goes into your eye. A researcher I know told me that every time you open your eyes, you lose about 2,000 DHA molecules. That's because it is actually consumed when we see. EPA is more of a delivery mechanism. It fluctuates in plasma in different ways. It accumulates quite differently. Interestingly enough, though, EPA seems to be connected with depression or improved or decreased levels of depression rather than DHA. So you need both.
Okay.
They are similar but different. They are both incorporated into your membranes. They have no real effect outside of the membranes. That's where they have their function.
Amazing. What are the benefits of krill oil in the body?
Well, as I said, it is all the things I've already mentioned, and the issue is the tissue. Krill oil seems to be good at bringing the EPA and DHA into the tissues.
Okay.
And if it resides in your adipocytes, in your fat storage, it will do nothing.
Yes.
It really needs to get into your body and not just stored as fat.
Perfect. Are there contraindications?
There used to be one contraindication for all omega-3s, especially promoted by the Germans, that the idea is that it might influence clotting and platelet aggregation. Several studies have shown no. It really doesn't seem to be like that. And I have seen no data that suggests, not in our own and in other research, that there is really any appreciable effect on either blood clotting or on platelet aggregation. So bleeding really isn't a problem with any of the omegas, including krill. There is one contraindication, and that is krill is a crustacean.
Okay.
And if you have a crustacean allergy, then out of precautions, you should avoid it.
You should avoid.
Now, have I seen any incidents of allergies? No, not so far. But still, it's on the label, and that's just the way we label foods.
Okay. So if you have any shellfish allergies, you shouldn't take it. Or just crustacean?
If you have shellfish allergy, then you should never do that unless you have consulted your physician.
Okay. Can a pregnant woman use krill oil?
Well, then, there are regulations as to how you can promote anything towards pregnant women.
Okay.
So I need to be quite careful about that because that's the regulations. But would you deny a woman to eat shrimp? No. Would you deny a woman to eat fatty fish? No. Would I actually urge pregnant women to eat fatty fish? Yes, I would, because they really need EPA and DHA for their child. And I could have talked with you for an hour about how important this is early in life. There are data, for example, levels of the omega-3s as measured by the omega-3 index. There are data showing that preterm birth is way lower when you have high concentrations. There are data that points to that children do better in intelligence tests first year after when the mother had high levels. There are data that shows that children are less prone to allergies like asthma and wheezing if the mother has high levels. So, and also I would like to add lactating mothers also need to take EPA and DHA. The mother will sacrifice her own DHA for the child, but will then deplete herself.
Yes.
So out of regulatory reasons, I cannot recommend it, but I would definitely point to the fact that women need those fatty acids.
Okay. Can krill oil reduce the excess of bad LDL cholesterol?
Well, we have done research that actually this was research done in non-human primates, that is in monkeys, because there are limits to what we are allowed to do in humans. But we showed a 20% reduction in LDL, which is quite unique for krill oil because fish oil doesn't do that. Fish oil actually, in some instances, increases LDL. Both krill oil and fish oil will reduce triglycerides. We also showed in the same study, we showed an increase in in HDL. So the answer is some of the research that we have suggests that that's the case.
Super. Can krill oil prevent cardiovascular disease?
The easy answer is yes, and I would like to emphasize the word prevent.
Okay.
There has been quite a lot of research on the secondary prevention. So after you've gotten ill, the effects are quite small, and some claim that they are negligible. I'm not sure about that. I think they're still worthwhile. But there is a strong body of research that shows that the omega-3s in general have such protective effects. Probably because they change the blood lipid levels, and TG is important, but there are other effects too. There might be specific effects directly on the myocardium, and especially on the conductive system in the heart, the His-Purkinje system. There are a number of studies showing, for example, there was a meta-study coming out, the Vital study showed that you had a 28% reduction in the incidence of cardiac infarction in Americans in general, and in Afro-Americans the reduction was 72%. That came out just recently at the end of last year.
Does it help in weight loss and weight control? And
weight loss, I would we've done one study, and it's a really strange. We actually tested this in obese German men.
okay.
And what we did was to measure their belly fat. You may know that your visceral fat, the fat in your belly, is more dangerous than the fat you have on your hips. And the interesting thing is that there is a specific system directing where fat goes, and it's actually the endocannabinoids. And the endocannabinoids will decide how you recruit fat. And so, long story short, the men lost belly fat. So they actually had a several percent reduction in the fat in their belly. They didn't lose weight though.
Okay.
So they probably moved the fat around. So in a way, maybe we made the fat a little healthier.
Does krill oil have anti-inflammatory activities, and what are they?
Yes. I'm tempted to say yes, but then I would like to moderate myself. Because the omega-3 is at the very why do they have all these different effects? That is because the mechanism of action is all about inflammation. And one of the main systems taking care of inflammation is what we call the lipid-derived signaling systems. And they are the eicosanoid system, so prostaglandins and leukotrienes and lipoxins. And then you have the endocannabinoid system that I mentioned. And then there is also a lot of focus these days on something called the resolvins and the marasins, so the pro-resolving system. All of these are part of the inflammatory system, and all of these modify. So if you say anti-inflammatory, then not really, but they're modifying the inflammation in such a way that they dampen inflammation and they direct inflammation in different ways without the side effects of anti-inflammatory drugs. So, for example, in your production of prostaglandins, prostaglandins made from arachidonic acid, the omega-6 fatty acid, are typically high in inflammatory activity. It's a separate class. And when it's made from EPA and DHA, then you actually get a different molecule that is typically lower in inflammatory activity. So they are very important modulators of inflammation. So they actually make inflammation, control inflammation, and also stop it when it needs to be stopped.
Okay, so it's important for inflammatory or autoimmune disease, you could say?
Autoimmune I would be careful about, but inflammatory conditions, yes.
Okay.
And if you look at where krill or omega-3s have an effect, then it's typically that has at its very core, an inflammatory component.
Okay. About What about hepatic steatosis? Can this oil help to reduce this condition?
I wish I could give you a clear answer because this is research that is going on.
Okay.
But the literature very strongly suggests that a combination of phospholipids with choline, so phosphatidylcholine and omega-3s separately and together should alleviate what is called non-alcoholic fatty liver. And we have done some animal experiments that clearly suggest this, and we are now conducting studies in humans. But the idea, and this is important, a large proportion of the world actually suffers from non-alcoholic fatty liver, and they have no idea. Because the diagnosis is by biopsies, and nobody wants to do a liver biopsy unless you have to. There are new methods coming in for diagnosis, and perhaps more than 60% of Americans suffer from non-alcoholic fatty liver. Now, non-alcoholic fatty liver is the first step, and you're still not really in a disease state, but you slide further down to steatosis. Now, the good thing is that I think there is good hope of taking phosphatidylcholine, even with omega-3s, may help reverse non-alcoholic fatty liver and prevent the further development into steatosis and metabolic syndrome.
It's like a silent disease. You might not be overweight or anything like that, but you do have the condition.
Well, you typically are overweight, but it's a very silent disease. And also, since the diagnosis is not really available, physicians or doctors are really, how do you really want to talk about something that you can't know for sure if you can diagnose? My prediction is that this is going to emerge as a very major health concern, maybe as large as blood pressure.
What are the recommended indications for the conservation of krill oil? Once you buy it, you have.
Okay. So, how to store it?
Yes.
Okay. There is not. You could store it, in your cupboard. There is, you should, as with any fat, don't expose it to sunlight. Okay. That's really no good idea. But otherwise, it's pretty robust. If you are going to store it for a very long time, I usually put it in the fridge, but it's not a requirement. Okay. And the shelf life, as given in the different climate under different climate conditions, is the expiry is when the oil cannot or until the oil cannot more fulfill the criteria for its content.
For consumers, what are some key elements to look out for in order to identify good quality krill oil?
I was tempted to say that it is produced by Aker Biomarine, but I shouldn't do that. You should look at the color.
Okay.
Of course, you need to read the label. There are products on the market that simply calls itself krill oil and doesn't contain enough phospholipids. A good krill oil has the right color, that is red. It's red. It is a good krill oil also has enough phospholipids in it. You shouldn't consider any krill oil with less than 40% phospholipids. Our products contain 45% or more, and the essential variety is what we call Superba Boost, which has more than 56% phospholipids. It's really the phospholipids that sets krill oil apart. If it doesn't contain phospholipids, it's really it becomes a colored fish oil.
Okay. And after all, why would you recommend the essential krill oil Superba Boost?
Well, for all the conditions that I mentioned, and again, the essential specific product is our Boost, which is the highest quality krill oil you could get.
Okay, thank you very much, Neil.
Thank you.